The general's glass hit the stone patio hard enough to split at the base. Bourbon flashed across the table. One piece of crystal spun beneath the framed postcard beside Dylan's microphone. Another slid toward my boot. Nobody on the live stream spoke. A second earlier, my cousin had been smiling into 3 cameras. "Go on, Tessa. Tell them your dramatic little warehouse call sign." I looked at the manifest enlarged behind him. Atlas 6. Major General Elias Vance lost his grip on the glass. The sound reached my left hand before the pain did. My last 2 fingers folded inward and would not release. Vance stared at the scar disappearing beneath my sleeve. Then he looked at the blue handwriting on the screen. "Open the original scan," he said. That was where the evening broke. 3 hours earlier, I had been standing outside Aunt Celia's house counting exits. Front door, kitchen door, sliding doors to the patio, a path around the generator shed, 4 ways out if the marsh road stayed clear. Celia lived outside Wilmington, in a house that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and low tide. She had turned 70 that week, and Dylan had convinced her to combine the family dinner with the launch of his new book. The patio had become a studio. Black cables ran beneath white rugs. 3 cameras faced a polished table. Soft lights had been clipped to the beams overhead, making the salt air look warmer than it was. Every time the backup generator cycled, the glasses hanging above the bar trembled 3 times. Dylan had invited a publisher, sponsors, veterans, and enough relatives to make leaving early look cruel. I had come for Celia. That was what I told myself when I saw the framed postcard. It showed a cargo harbor beneath a washed-out blue sky. On the back, enlarged for the cameras, someone had written, "Atlas 6 kept every name on the page." Cream mounting tape covered the lower section where the recipient's name should have been. I recognized the brown ring near the stamp. My mother drank chicory coffee from a mug with a chipped red rim. She set it on bills, photographs, and the military papers she kept after I came home. That ring had been on the postcard when it belonged to her. I touched the cargo tag inside my wallet. The torn cardboard corner was still sharp enough to find with my thumb. Celia came beside me, carrying a tray of crab cakes. "You saw it," she said. "Where did Dylan get it?" "He said it came from his father's papers." "It didn't." Her mouth tightened. "Tessa, please. He has worked on this for 2 years. It is your birthday." "That too." She picked up the lighthouse-shaped letter opener beside the guest book and freed a ribbon caught beneath the postcard frame. "Do not let this become another family war." There had never been a family war. Wars required 2 sides willing to fight. I had mostly left. Dylan found me 10 minutes later. At 42, he had the smooth energy of a man who had learned that confidence looked best under warm lighting. His navy jacket had no wrinkles. A wireless microphone clipped to his collar like a decoration he had earned. "There she is, the actual Marine." "Former Marine. You are never former. Marines say that when they want you to buy another drink." He laughed too loudly and placed an arm around my shoulders. The movement pulled against the scar in my left forearm. 3 pieces of metal had gone through it at Port Saphira. 2 came out. 1 stayed close enough to the nerve that the surgeon left it alone. My family believed I had injured the arm in a warehouse accident. That explanation survived because nobody asked a second question. Dylan turned me toward the cameras. "We may bring you on for a minute. Family angle. One cousin studies military history, the other moves refrigerated medicine. I dispatch trucks." "Exactly. Logistics." He said the word the way people say laundry. Behind him, a producer tested the feed. "Local recording is running," Mateo Ruiz said. "Cloud backup too?" Dylan asked. "And local. I do not trust venue internet." At the far end of the patio, Major General Elias Vance was speaking with Priya Shah from the publishing company. I recognized the posture before Celia whispered his name. Dylan had built the launch around him. Vance's endorsement would certify that the book was more than internet folklore. The publisher had tied its final payment to that verification. I learned the numbers because Dylan repeated them near the bar. $190,000 released after the event. 47 days before the bridge loan came due. $284,000 owed. If tonight goes clean, he told an uncle. The company breathes. That explained the cameras, the sponsors, and the postcard under glass. It also explained why he kept checking whether I was still in the room. He did not think I could damage the launch. He thought I could make it warmer. A forgotten cousin in an old Marine jacket. A warehouse supervisor with a stiff hand. Proof that his military obsession belonged to the family. When the red light came on, Dylan's entire body changed. He welcomed the audience, thanked the publisher, praised General Vance, and introduced the postcard as the object that had started his investigation. Then he looked at me. And because history has a sense of humor, my cousin Tessa is here. She did logistics in the Marines before becoming a warehouse supervisor. I heard Celia inhale. Dylan smiled. Come sit with us, Captain Cold Storage. The audience laughed. I should have taken one of the 4 exits. Instead, I stepped into the camera frame. Dylan pulled out the chair beside him with one hand and kept the other open toward the camera. The gesture looked generous. It was not. The chair had been placed lower than the others. From the live stream angle, General Vance and Priya sat upright beneath the book banner, while I appeared near the edge of the frame, half blocked by the postcard display. Dylan had arranged even the humiliation. I sat anyway. The cold air blowing from the portable unit found the metal still buried in my forearm. My ring finger tightened first, then the little finger followed. I placed my left hand beneath the table. Dylan turned toward the audience. Tessa served honorably, he said, using the tone people reserve for children who have completed a difficult school project. But military logistics is not what the movies make it look like. Movies rarely include refrigeration failures. A few people laughed. Dylan did not. He tapped the large screen behind us. The cover of his book disappeared, replaced by a scanned convoy manifest. The page was yellowed and crooked. Vehicle numbers ran down the left margin. Cargo categories filled the center. Medical priority marks had been reproduced in dark gray. Except they had not been dark gray when I wrote them. Most of the book came from documents like this, Dylan said. Records nobody had studied closely until I found them. Priya looked up from her tablet. Recovered them, she corrected. Dylan's smile held. Recovered. Digitized. Interpreted. The last word bothered me most. On the screen, the handwriting changed halfway down the page. The first 23 entries leaned slightly left. The rest pressed hard toward the right margin, letters compressed around the vehicle numbers. I remembered blood making the paper stick to my wrist. Dylan followed my gaze. You recognize the format? I recognized the page. That made him pause. Only for a second. Then he laughed and faced the camera again. Of course she does. Every warehouse has manifests. Not with casualty precedence marks. Priya stopped typing. Dylan tilted his head. Those are cargo priority codes. No. The patio quieted by a degree. Not silence. Not yet. He enlarged the center of the page with 2 fingers. A column of symbols filled the screen. Then enlighten us. I looked at the postcard beneath the glass. The mounting tape hid the name. It did not hide my mother's coffee ring. Dylan had photographed the document at high resolution, but he had never understood the stain. My mother used to drink chicory coffee at 4 a.m, when my pain woke both of us. She would sit at the kitchen table without turning on the overhead light. Sometimes she asked about Port Saphira. Most nights she simply kept the mug warm between her hands. After she died, Aunt Celia stored 2 boxes of her papers in the upstairs office. Dylan had offered to digitize them. I finally understood what that had meant. They mark patient movement, I said. Immediate surgery, controlled bleeding, non-ambulatory. Those vehicles were not carrying ordinary cargo. Dylan's thumb stopped against the screen. General Vance had not moved. Priya asked, Is that reflected in the source notes? It is explained in the chapter, Dylan said. That was not my question. He ignored her and leaned closer to me. You may remember similar forms, Tess. That does not mean this is one of yours. I could have answered. Instead, I watched him build the lie high enough to fall from it. He turned back toward the live stream. This is actually a perfect example of how family memory works. Tessa spent a few years around supply units, so every logistics story feels familiar to her. A few years? He smiled as if I had helped. 8? 9? 11. Right. 11 years near warehouses, loading yards, refrigerated containers. The word near did the work he needed. Near the danger. Near the people who mattered. Near history, but never inside it. He picked up the framed postcard and held it toward the center camera. This, on the other hand, came from the officer who commanded the evacuation convoy. His call sign was Atlas 6. My left hand went completely still. Dylan did not notice. General Vance did. The older man's eyes moved from the frame to my hidden arm. Dylan continued. Atlas 6 was a field commander, with the nerve to hold 47 vehicles together after the port control station was destroyed. That is leadership, not barcode scanners, not freezer temperatures. A laugh came from one of the sponsor tables. Nate Monroe, Dylan's younger brother, lifted his beer. Careful. Tessa takes freezer temperatures personally. Dylan gave him the grin of a man relieved to have the room back. Then he looked at me. Did they give warehouse officers call signs too? Priya closed her tablet cover. Dylan, it is family humor. No, I said. It is audience management. His eyes hardened. The cameras were still running. That kept his voice pleasant. Fine. Tell everyone. What did they call you? The generator started behind the wall. 3 hanging glasses trembled above the bar. My fingers locked beneath the table. I looked at the enlarged manifest. At the final 5 entries written with my right hand. At the postcard Dylan had taken from my mother's papers. At the retired general he had invited to certify a story he did not own. Atlas 6. General Vance's lowball slipped from his hand. It struck the patio. The base split. Bourbon crossed the stone and touched the bottom corner of the postcard frame. The sharp sound drove a tone through my damaged arm and into my teeth. I bent by reflex. My left hand would not open. Vance saw it. He pushed his chair back slowly, his face emptied of every expression except calculation. Which hand did you use after the control roof came down? Dylan stared at him. I answered. My right. Vance looked at the second half of the manifest, then at the crescent scar disappearing beneath my sleeve. Who taught you to write vehicle status in blue? Nobody. The black pen was under the roof plate with part of my arm. No one laughed. Dylan recovered first. That detail was in the research package. Priya turned toward him. No, it was not. Vance held out his hand. Open the original scan. Dylan did not move. The general reached inside his jacket and removed a small black notebook worn soft at the corners. When he opened it, a strip of faded blue paper served as the bookmark. The faded strip was not paper from the notebook. It was the torn corner of a cargo tag. Across it, in block letters blurred by age, someone had written 47/5. General Vance placed the notebook beside the broken glass. Dylan stared at the tag, then at the manifest on the screen. What is that supposed to prove? Nothing yet, Vance said. His voice had changed. He was no longer a guest helping sell a book. He was an officer, reconstructing an event. He turned the notebook toward himself. Port Saphira, 14th of September. The control station took the first hit at 0443. My mouth tasted like copper. Not because the detail surprised me. Because it did not. Vance continued. Primary radio failed 4 minutes later. Vehicle tracking went down after the second impact. Dylan shifted toward the camera. For context, General, the book explains all of that. No, the book simplifies it. Priya reopened her tablet. Vance glanced at the enlarged manifest. The published version says, Atlas 6 inherited an organized convoy and kept it moving under fire. That is the documented account. That is the marketable account. A thin line appeared between Dylan's eyebrows. Vance tapped the blue strip. The convoy was not organized when Atlas 6 took control. The memory returned in pieces. A refrigeration alarm, the smell of diesel and burned insulation. A printer feeding out half a page before the power died. Port Saphira had been built for commercial cargo, not for moving wounded people through indirect fire. Containers were stacked high enough to block sight lines. Civilian trucks had been mixed with military vehicles. Half the drivers were on the wrong radio frequency. The first explosion took out the roof above movement control. The second killed the tracking system. By the time I reached the open yard, nobody had a complete list of what was still capable of moving. Some vehicles held medical cargo. Some carried blood. Others held wounded personnel who could not survive another hour in the heat. 5 flatbed frames sat empty near the fuel barriers. They looked useless. That was why I kept them. 47 vehicles, Vance said at the table. 5 empty flatbeds. Dylan nodded quickly. Yes, that is in Chapter 9. Why were the flatbeds empty? Dylan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I answered before I meant to. Because empty metal holds heat. Vance looked at me. And? From a distance, after the engines ran, they looked loaded on thermal surveillance. Priya stopped typing again. Dylan leaned back. That theory has never been confirmed. It was not a theory. The words came out colder than I intended. I remembered ordering the 5 empty frames onto the North Service Road. They made noise. They threw dust. They drew attention away from the medical vehicles leaving through the maintenance lane. It bought us 11 minutes. Not enough to feel safe. Enough to move. The control roof came down while I was rewriting the sequence. A strip of metal entered my arm just below the elbow. Another cut through the muscles near my wrist. The third stopped beside the nerve that still made my fingers fold when the temperature dropped. I did not remember hitting the ground. I remembered the manifest floating down beside me. The black pen had disappeared beneath the roof plate. A corpsman knelt over my arm and tried to pull me toward cover. I asked him for something to write with. He gave me a blue pen from his chest pocket. You wrote the rest with your right hand, Vance said. Yes. While being treated? Treatment is generous. The general's eyes lowered briefly. He had been a lieutenant colonel then, waiting beyond the outer checkpoint with the receiving force. He had never seen the roof fall. He had heard the radio traffic and watched vehicles emerge from the wrong road, in an order no one had approved. The first group carried surgical casualties. The second carried blood and temperature-sensitive medication. Fuel came third. Equipment came last. That order had violated the priority directive issued before the attack. It had also kept the people in the first group alive. Dylan folded his hands. None of this proves Tessa was Atlas 6. The room turned toward him. He sounded reasonable again. That was his talent. He never fought the strongest fact directly. He moved the argument 1 inch to the side and asked everyone to begin again. The manifest uses initials, he said. TM. The officer in the operational summary is identified as Thomas Monroe. Vance's face did not change. Dylan pointed toward the scan. My cousin worked logistics. She may have seen related forms. She may even have handled copies afterward. But family resemblance is not provenance. Priya's eyes narrowed slightly at hearing her own word returned to her. Dylan kept going. Stress changes memory, so does grief. Tessa lost her mother, and those boxes passed through several homes before I received them. Celia looked down at the table. He had moved carefully. From military uncertainty to damaged memory. From stolen documents to family confusion. From a public challenge to concern for my health. Someone near the cameras whispered that the explanation made sense. Dylan heard it. His shoulders loosened. If we are being precise, he said, Atlas 6 was a male field officer named Thomas Monroe. Tessa was a junior logistics captain attached elsewhere. It was the first time he had said the invented name in front of me. Thomas Monroe. Close enough to Monroe to survive a careless search. Different enough to replace me. General Vance closed his notebook. Where did you get that name? From the source file. Which source file? Which source file? The operational summary. Who provided it? Dylan glanced toward Priya. The archival package. Priya did not help him. There is no Thomas Morrow in the personnel index you submitted. Dylan smiled, but less of him participated this time. Classified attachments are often incomplete. Vance looked at the manifest on the screen. Then he looked at me. What did you write beside Vehicle 5? I knew the answer before I could stop the memory. Ames had been inside that vehicle. His left hand had been crushed when the truck rolled against a barrier during the second impact. He kept asking whether his name was still on the list. Not whether he would live, whether we had lost his name. I had written beside the entry, "Still aboard, do not remove." But I did not say it. Not yet. Dylan mistook my silence for defeat. He turned toward the cameras. There. This is what happens when emotion collides with documentation. Then I saw the lower corner of the manifest. A small notation, nearly hidden beneath the publisher's watermark. 47/5. The same numbers on the cargo tag in General Vance's notebook. The same numbers on the torn card inside my wallet. My thumb found its edge. For the first time that evening, I stopped looking for an exit. I took the cargo tag from my wallet. The cardboard had softened along the fold, but the blue stripe still crossed the top. Dried blood darkened one corner. Beneath it, in my right-handed writing, were the same numbers displayed on Dylan's screen. 47/5. I placed it beside the strip in General Vance's notebook. The torn edges matched. Not perfectly. Time had curled one piece and flattened the other, but the fibers met where the original movement tag had been ripped in half at the receiving checkpoint. One half had stayed with Vance's convoy records. The other had left Port Saphira with me. Vance did not touch them. He looked at Dylan. Where is the receiving half listed in your source notes? Dylan stared at the two pieces. That could have come from the same archive. It came from my wallet, I said. You had access to your mother's boxes. So did you. His jaw moved once. Priya stood and came around the table. She photographed both sides of the tag without shifting them, then placed a clear document sleeve beside me. May I? I slid my half into it. Dylan laughed softly. We are treating a piece of cardboard like forensic evidence now? No, Priya said. We are preserving an object connected to a disputed source. The difference mattered. Dylan knew it did. He turned toward the livestream camera. Let us slow this down. Tessa has an old tag. The general has another piece. That does not identify the officer who led the convoy. Vance opened his notebook again. Vehicle 5. The number pressed against the scar in my arm. He read from the page. Driver, Corporal Ames. Left-hand crush injury. Vehicle temporarily immobilized at the east barrier. The room narrowed. Ames had been 23 and newly married. He had shown me a photograph of his wife standing beside a yellow kitchen wall they had painted themselves. After the truck rolled, his hand was caught between the door frame and the barrier. We could not move the vehicle without risking more damage to him. We also could not leave it where it blocked the maintenance lane. The corpsman kept asking for 2 minutes. The convoy kept asking for movement. Ames asked only one thing. Ma'am, am I still on your page? I had looked down at the manifest and seen his name blurred beneath my blood. I wrote beside Vehicle 5 with my right hand. Still aboard. Do not remove. At the table, Vance raised his eyes. What was written beside that entry? I could have let him answer. Instead, I looked at the screen. Still aboard. Do not remove. Priya enlarged the lower portion of the manifest. The publisher's watermark faded. The handwritten note appeared beneath it. The words were compressed and uneven. Still aboard. Do not remove. Celia sat down without looking for a chair. Dylan's brother lowered his beer. General Vance touched one finger to his notebook. That phrase was never in the operational summary. Dylan's voice came quickly. It may have appeared in supporting material. Which supporting material? I would have to check. You built a company around checking. The general did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Dylan looked toward Priya. She had already connected her tablet to the display. "I need the full source package," she said. "This is not the place for a document audit. You made provenance the centerpiece of a live verification event." That was before a family member disrupted it. Priya met his eyes. "The verification did not become invalid because it stopped being useful to you." Matteo remained behind the center camera. His fingers rested near the control board. Dylan glanced at him. "Take us to the sponsor reel." Matteo hesitated. "Dylan? Run the sponsor reel." Priya spoke before Matteo moved. "Keep the source display live." The producer looked between them. Dylan owned the company. Priya represented the contract that kept it alive. Matteo left the screen unchanged. I watched something small break behind Dylan's eyes. Not panic. Permission. He had spent the entire evening controlling angles, timing, language, and light. Now the people he hired were beginning to follow the process instead of him. He sat back down. "Fine, let us verify everything." The warmth returned to his voice. He was changing strategies. "Priya, open the source index. You will see the operational summary, the postcard, the manifest, and the personnel reference identifying Thomas Monroe." She entered a password. Folders appeared on the screen. Scans. Interview transcripts. Draft chapters. Research notes. A directory labeled provenance. At the top of the index, a package summary listed 812 pages, 406 image files, 23 interview transcripts, and 118 gigabytes of source material. Priya read the certification line beneath it. Compiled by Frontline Logic Media and certified complete for publisher review. Priya selected the directory. A warning box appeared. External archive not synchronized. She frowned. When was this directory last connected? Dylan shrugged. Probably at the office. The publisher required a complete local package for tonight. You have the relevant files. I have files you selected. He smiled. All research is selected. Priya did not respond. She opened the manifest metadata. The file had been created 3 years earlier. The device owner was listed as Helen Monroe. "My mother." Celia covered her mouth. Dylan leaned forward. "That proves the document came through the family." "It proves your source declaration is inaccurate," Priya said. "You attributed the archive to Robert Monroe." "My father managed the estate." "Your father died before this scan was created." The silence that followed was different from the silence after the glass broke. That first silence had been shock. This one was arithmetic. Everyone had begun calculating how many explanations Dylan had left. He stood. "My aunt asked me to digitize family materials. There was no theft." Celia looked at him. "I asked you to scan photographs." "You gave me the boxes. I gave you access to the office." He turned toward her. "Do not do this now." It was the first time that evening he forgot the cameras were running. Celia's face changed. Not dramatically. She simply removed her hand from the edge of his chair. Priya opened the postcard scan. The coffee ring appeared in high resolution. Beneath the mounting tape, the hidden section cast a faint raised shadow. "The original card is on the table," she said. "We can inspect the covered area without altering the scan." Dylan reached for the frame. I put my right hand over it. He stopped. His eyes moved to my scarred left arm. Then he looked at the camera and found his public voice again. "Tessa, listen to yourself. You are claiming that I stole your identity because you recognize your mother's coffee stain. I have not claimed anything. You came here angry. I came for Celia. You have resented this project since it became successful. I did not know it was mine." His smile sharpened. "There it is." He turned toward the live stream. "My cousin now believes she is the central figure in a classified military operation because of an old injury, a damaged document, and grief over her mother." General Vance rose. Dylan kept speaking. "Tessa has struggled with memory since she came home. The family has protected her privacy for years. My pulse did not change. That surprised me. He looked directly at me. And now she is using my aunt's birthday and my father's legacy to insert herself into a story she never led. The pain in my left hand disappeared beneath something colder. I turned toward Matteo. Is the local recording still running? Yes. Keep it running. Dylan's face lost the last trace of warmth. Tessa, do not threaten me. I am not threatening you. I looked at Priya. Open the original source history. Then Aunt Celia picked up the lighthouse-shaped letter opener. The tip slid beneath the mounting tape. Dylan reached across the table. Don't damage it. Celia looked at him for the first time as though he were a stranger in her house. You told me it belonged to your father. It does. Then you should not be afraid of the name underneath. She lifted the first strip slowly. The adhesive resisted with a dry tearing sound. Nobody moved. Even Matteo left both hands above the controls where the cameras could see them. The tape came free from the lower left corner. One line of blue ink appeared. For Captain Tessa Monroe. Celia stopped breathing. Dylan did not. That proves the card was mailed to her, he said. It does not prove she was Atlas 6. Vance stepped closer. Remove the rest. Celia lifted the second strip. Care of Helen Monroe. My mother's name sat beneath the stain from her coffee cup. For 3 years, Dylan had displayed the ring as proof of age, while hiding the 2 names that explained how the postcard entered his possession. Priya photographed the exposed card. Matteo, timestamped the live image and local backup. Done. Dylan's gaze snapped toward him. You work for me. Matteo swallowed. I work for the company. That is the same thing. No, Priya said. It may not be after tonight. The general picked up the postcard by its edges and read the message aloud. Atlas 6 kept every name on the page. 47 vehicles came through. 5 shadows went north. The living went first. His voice lowered on the final sentence. I wrote this 6 days after Port Saphira. Dylan folded his arms. You wrote it to Tessa. Fine. She may have helped prepare the convoy. Vance looked at him. I wrote it because I was the receiving commander. I watched the medical vehicles clear the south checkpoint while the decoys drew fire north. Atlas 6 was the officer on the radio. You never saw the officer. No. Dylan watched the exposed address as if it were only another obstacle he could rename. Then, the postcard proves delivery, he said. Not command. Vance did not argue. Correct. So we verify command. Priya removed the publisher overlay from the display. The full scan appeared, including the personnel certification line Dylan's presentation had cropped away. The name was faint. Captain Tessa Marie Monroe. Below it sat a signature I had not seen in 11 years. My own. The room did not erupt. Truth rarely arrives with the timing people expect. Sometimes it appears as 12 pale letters at the bottom of a damaged page, and everyone has to decide whether they are willing to read them. Nate set his beer down. Celia sat with the letter opener still in her hand. Dylan leaned toward the screen. That certification could have been added later. Priya enlarged the file properties. The scan predates your first podcast episode by 14 months. I mean before the scan. Vance opened his notebook to the page beside Vehicle 5. He turned it toward the camera. At the bottom, beneath his own handwriting, was a notation from the receiving clerk. Manifest accepted from Captain Tessa Monroe, Atlas 6. Left arm trauma. Evacuated after final vehicle clearance. The date matched. The convoy count matched. The note beside Ames matched. The torn cargo tag matched. Dylan stared at the page as if enough concentration could rearrange the ink. Then he laughed once. It was not amusement. It was a man testing whether his old voice still worked. All right. Tessa was Atlas 6. The admission moved through the patio. He raised one hand before anyone could speak. But this is not theft. Military history belongs to more than one person. I reconstructed an operation from incomplete records. The name Thomas Morrow came from a working draft. When better evidence appears, responsible historians correct the record. Priya's expression remained neutral. Then you will not object to opening the revision history. His hand lowered. There are confidential editorial notes. The contract gives us access to source changes related to identity and attribution. This is a live family event. You made it a live verification event. Dylan looked at Vance. The general did not rescue him. He looked at Celia. She placed the letter opener flat on the table between them. Finally, Dylan turned to me. You know what happens if she opens those files? I know what happened when you closed them. His voice dropped. 6 people work for me. I know. They have mortgages, children. I know. You want to burn all of that because your name is missing from one chapter? There it was. Not denial. Price. Dylan had reached the point where he no longer argued that the story was his. He argued that correcting it would be too expensive. Priya selected the editorial directory. A password prompt appeared. She entered her publisher credentials. The first document opened beside the manifest. Research Draft 1. The operation summary named Captain Tessa Monroe 3 times. Draft 2 changed the second reference to T. Monroe. Draft 3 replaced it with Captain Thomas Morrow. A comment bubble appeared in the margin. Dylan Monroe. Female logistics lead complicates the frontline narrative. Consolidate command decisions under a male field officer. Nobody spoke. Priya opened the next version. Another comment. Dylan Monroe. Keep every name on the page. Strong brand language. Remove postcard addressee before photography. Celia closed her eyes. Dylan stepped toward the screen. Editorial shorthand is not a confession. Priya clicked again. A message thread appeared between Dylan and a freelance editor. The editor had asked whether Thomas Morrow was a composite. Dylan's reply was 6 lines long. The last line was enough. Tessa will never challenge it. She wants nothing to do with publicity. The scar in my arm began to ache. Not sharply, almost politely. The body sometimes understands finality before the mind does. Vance removed the endorsement card from the display copy of the book. He tore nothing. He simply slid the card free and placed it beside the broken glass. My name does not stay on this. Dylan's face hardened. You endorsed the operation. I endorsed the version you said was sourced. The events are still true. The dead do not become more honored when you change the living. That was the only sentence Vance gave him. Priya opened one final file. It was a marketing presentation dated 9 months earlier. A slide described the audience problem. Readers respond better to a single male battlefield protagonist than to a distributed logistics command. The next slide showed the postcard slogan in large type. Every name on the page. Below it were projected revenue figures. Podcast licensing. Book advance. Speaking events. Merchandise. The words Ames had begged me to protect had become a product line. I looked at Dylan. Did you ever read the note beside Vehicle 5? He said nothing. Did you know why that sentence mattered? I knew it was effective. For the first time all evening, General Vance looked angry. Not loud, not theatrical. His face simply became still. I turned to Priya. The roster. What about it? If any version continues, every person on that convoy is named. Drivers, corpsmen, interpreters, maintenance crews, the people who kept the refrigeration units running, all of them. Dylan shook his head. That is not a book. That is an appendix. It is the page. He understood the sentence. I watched him understand that I was not asking for his spotlight. I was taking away his right to decide who stood inside it. Priya closed the marketing presentation. Effective immediately, release is suspended, pending a full provenance review. Dylan stepped toward her. You cannot suspend the contract during a live event. I can suspend delivery when the source declaration appears materially false. The final payment is due tomorrow. It is no longer scheduled. The number landed harder than any accusation. $190,000 vanished from his face. He looked toward Matteo. "Cut the feed." Matteo's eyes moved to me. The choice belonged to him, but the pressure did not. I spoke quietly. "Leave the correction live." Dylan pointed at me. "You are destroying this company." "No." I looked at the postcard, the manifest, the 2 pieces of blue cargo tag, and the broken glass drying on the stone. "You built it where my name used to be." Dylan looked at me as though I had struck him. Behind the cameras, the live stream comments were moving too quickly for Matteo to read. Priya muted the public display but left the recording active. The general remained beside the table. No salute. No ceremony. Just a retired officer standing next to the name he had nearly helped erase a second time. Dylan lowered his voice. "You know the loan comes due in 47 days. Yes. If the publisher freezes payment, payroll stops first." Matteo looked away. The other employees were not on the patio. They were back at the office editing clips, managing sponsors, and answering customer emails for a company built on a story they had been told was legitimate. They had not hidden my name. Dylan had. Priya gathered the printed source declarations. "A suspension is not a termination," she said. "The publisher can commission an independent review. The project may continue if the archive is corrected and all affected contributors consent." Dylan laughed bitterly. "You think readers want a logistics appendix?" General Vance closed his notebook. "They may want the truth. The truth does not make payroll." "No," I said. "But neither does fraud once sponsors find it." His eyes moved toward me. I had never seen Dylan without an audience before. Even at family dinners, he performed some version of himself. The successful cousin. The storyteller. The man who could make any room warmer by entering it. Now the cameras had stopped helping him. "What do you want?" he asked. Not what was true. Not what he had done. What would make the problem end? I looked at Priya. "Can the current production staff be separated from the provenance review?" If they had no role in source alteration, yes. "Can their completed work be paid from the existing production reserve?" She considered it. "The publisher can authorize payment for verified labor already delivered. Future work would require a new editor and a revised contract." Dylan stared at me. "You are negotiating my company away from me. I am keeping your employees from paying for your decision." That silenced him longer than anger would have. Matteo finally stepped from behind the camera. "I never saw the original files," he said. "He gave us approved excerpts." Priya nodded. "Preserve every local backup. Do not alter file names, dates, or project folders." Matteo looked relieved to receive an instruction that did not require choosing a family side. Celia moved the birthday cake away from the broken glass. The icing had begun to soften beneath the patio lights. One candle leaned into another. She looked at Dylan. "You used Helen's papers." He rubbed both hands across his face. "I was trying to save the company. You started using them before the loan." He did not answer. That was the first honest thing he gave her. General Vance lifted the postcard. "What happens to this?" Priya looked at me. The card had belonged to my mother because I had not known what to do with it when it arrived. She kept the things I could not yet touch. Hospital bracelets. Folded orders. A letter from Ames written with his right hand while surgeons worked to save the left. After she died, I told myself those objects were only paper. Dylan had understood their value before I did. He had simply misunderstood what kind of value they carried. "The postcard does not belong in my house," I said. Dylan looked surprised. "It belongs with the complete convoy record." Vance nodded once. 4 days later, on October 22nd, the publisher served Frontline Logic Media with a formal notice of material breach under the source warranty and attribution clauses. The final payment of $190,000 remained withheld. On November 22nd, Dylan signed a binding correction and rights assignment agreement that removed him from editorial control and transferred the archive division to an independent successor. 3 months later, the revised exhibit opened at the Marine Corps Logistics School. I did not attend the ceremony. Priya sent photographs. The postcard stood behind protective glass, but nothing covered the address. Beside it was the original manifest, the 2 matching pieces of the cargo tag, and a roster containing every driver, corpsman, interpreter, mechanic, dispatcher, and receiving clerk involved at Port Saphira. My name appeared once, the same size as everyone else's. The corrected book was released under an independent editor the following spring. Dylan's name remained on the early research credit, because removing him would have created another false record. His author photograph did not remain on the cover. The title changed too. Not Atlas 6. Not The Man Who Moved 47 Vehicles. The new title was Every Name on the Page. 6 employees kept their jobs through the transition. Matteo became production manager under the new company that acquired the archive division. Priya sent me the final source declaration before publication. I signed only the line confirming my own account. Dylan called twice. I did not answer. Then he sent a letter through Celia. I returned it unopened with the correction agreement from my attorney. There are apologies that seek forgiveness. There are others that seek renewed access. I was no longer confusing the two. Some people will treat your silence as abandoned property. They will tell themselves that because you did not speak about what happened, you surrendered the right to name it. Because you did not ask for a stage, they will assume the story belongs to whoever is willing to stand beneath the brightest light. It does not. Privacy is not permission. Grief is not consent. Refusing to perform your pain does not make that pain available for someone else to edit, package, or sell. A person can know that you want no publicity and still owe you the truth. They can know that you prefer distance and still have no right to fill that distance with a version of you that serves them better. For years, I believed the safest thing I could do was leave the room. I thought privacy meant keeping the door closed and expecting decent people not to enter. But a closed door is only a boundary when the person on the other side respects it. Dylan had treated my absence as an opening. He had mistaken my refusal to perform for permission to replace me. I never wanted revenge. I wanted the truth returned to the record. I wanted Ames's question to mean what it had meant when he asked it. I wanted the drivers, corpsmen, interpreters, mechanics, dispatchers, and clerks restored to the operation they had carried together. I wanted the postcard to stop advertising a lie, and I wanted the people who had done honest work for Dylan to keep their names, their wages, and their futures. Correction did not require me to become cruel. It did not require me to save the man who harmed me either. Those were different responsibilities, and I had spent too many years allowing other people to combine them. I could protect innocent employees without protecting Dylan's control. I could permit a corrected book without permitting him back into my life. I could acknowledge his early research without accepting his excuse. That distinction matters when someone uses family, loyalty, money, illness, grief, or shared history to make your boundary sound like punishment. A consequence is not cruelty simply because the person facing it dislikes the cost. Refusing renewed access is not vengeance. Declining to reopen a door is not the same as attacking the person outside it. Maybe someone in your life has mistaken your distance for weakness, your restraint for ignorance, or your forgiveness for permanent access. Maybe they have told your story in a way that makes them generous and you ungrateful. Maybe they have used the needs of innocent people to make you responsible for repairing damage you did not cause. You are allowed to separate those things. You are allowed to correct the record without taking every person down with it. You are allowed to protect bystanders without protecting the lie. You are allowed to accept an apology without granting another audience, another meeting, or another chance to negotiate what already happened. You are allowed to keep your name small, private, and accurate. You are allowed to want dignity instead of attention. I did not need my name printed larger than anyone else's. I needed it restored to the place where Dylan had removed it. That difference became the boundary I had failed to draw for years. The exhibit did not make me more important than the others. It made it harder for anyone to pretend the others had never been there. Sometimes justice is not taking everything away. Sometimes it is returning every name, every choice, and every consequence to the person who owns it. Sometimes peace begins when you stop explaining your boundary to the person who benefited from its absence. Share this with someone who may need that reminder today. On the first cold morning of December, I stood inside the pharmaceutical dispatch center while 40 refrigerated trucks prepared to leave. A warning tone sounded from one of the cooling units. My left hand tightened. It always would. I pressed my palm against the metal desk until the fingers released, then checked the driver list again. 40 names. 40 routes. 40 people expected somewhere before sunrise. The final truck cleared the gate at 6:14. On the monitor, every vehicle changed from waiting to moving. A soft confirmation beep sounded after each one. I stayed until the last name remained on the page.